The last time I did a mock draft, everyone was consistently hitting me up in the comments saying, Kyle, what would you do if you're drafting at the end of the first round? So that's what we're doing today, breaking down some scenarios and trying to figure out if you're drafting at the end of the first, what is going to be your best path to a great draft. Hit the like button, subscribe if you're new here, and at the end of the video, leave me a comment down below and let me know what grade you give me for this mock. For the purposes of this mock, we're going with a half PPR format, 2 running backs, 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, and 1 flex. We're only going to throw out 1 starting quarterback for right now, and if you were to be saying, Kyle, well, what about super flex leagues? What would you do? It's quite simple. Quarterbacks are just going to go a little bit earlier than a 1 quarterback league. That's the only difference. But let's hop right into it and let's see how this mock plays out. All right, the draft board is already starting to fill out and we are at the very end of the first round, which I believe most people have the biggest questions about right now. Because when you get to the end of the first round, you're getting a ton of running back value right now, but people are still wanting to hammer the wide receiver position. And it's one of the reasons why I'm telling people the best starts to your draft this year, and it's statistically proven based on several videos that I have done, is either to go running back, wide receiver, running back, or wide receiver, running back, running back. So at the end of the first round, we have a really good opportunity to go several different ways. Because here at the end of the first for running backs, Nick Chubb and Derrick Henry would be my 2 targets, and for wide receivers, AJ Brown or CeeDee Lamb. Jonathan Taylor would also fit into the end of the first round here if him and the Colts could figure out whatever it is they are going through, or he would be traded to a team that we know he would be utilized the same. I'm going to decide to go with wide receiver. Now let me break down for you real quick why. Because if I were to go with a running back here, and let's say team number 12 went back-to-back wide receivers, there isn't another wide receiver that I really love outside of AJ Brown and CeeDee Lamb. But I'm gonna go with AJ Brown here because I like AJ Brown this year a lot. I've done videos on him already. And then if for some reason he were to go back-to-back running backs and take the 2 guys that I'm most interested in, Derrick Henry or Nick Chubb, then I could either risk it with Jonathan Taylor, or you know what? I'll just get a little saucy and I'm gonna go ahead and grab a running back that I would actually get towards the end of the next round anyway. So let's go ahead and lock AJ Brown in at this pick for me. And look at that. What we ended up planning for didn't even happen in a good way because Team 12 decides to go with Patrick Mahomes as their QB1, which honestly doesn't shock me. There's going to be people in your drafts this year that go with a quarterback in the first round. Now, Jonathan Taylor going right here, that doesn't shock me a whole lot either. A lot of things have not updated in terms of his ADP and even some projections for this year. But it's still pretty semi-realistic at this point because he's going to be a second-round pick even if all this stuff doesn't resolve itself. So you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go ahead and go with my running back here. And because it's a mock draft, I'm gonna show some love to my boy Nick Chubb, and we're gonna go with him over Derrick Henry. All right, now we're back to our pick here in the 3rd round. And this is a great example of why you have to get 1 to 2 running backs right away in your first 2 picks. Because now we've made it to the end of the 3rd round. And when you take a look at the running backs that are still available here, there's not a lot of guys that you would love as your RB1. Jahmyr Gibbs absolutely has some good potential this season, but I think people are confusing good football potential and fantasy football potential because those things are going to be different when it comes to Gibbs. And I'm going to explain that in a video coming up. But there's a guy that I love here towards the end of the 3rd round who's falling even a little bit further right now because of his injury, and that's Kenneth Walker. Now, Kenneth Walker is going to lose a little bit of upside to Zach Charbonnet, but he is still a guy that is full-fledged top 12 potential at the running back position because he's not going to lose enough to Zach Charbonnet that he's not a weekly start in fantasy. And not only that, but I got my high upside wide receiver 1. I got a really safe running back that's got upside in his own right as my RB1. And now I get to grab Kenneth Walker, who might have a low floor at some point this season, but still will have a nice weekly upside to go with it. This is a great balance to start. Now with this format, I set it up to what a lot of rosters are seeing seeing these days, and I keep getting the question, Kyle, what are you doing if we have 3 wide receiver spots? So in this draft, I gave us 3 wide receiver spots and only 1 flex spot. And you know what that changes for me? Absolutely nothing, because all the videos I have shown you this year break down the fact that wide receivers a little later in your draft are going to be a much better value than any running back you select. So this is where things get really interesting for you, because you either take your RB3 right here, which allows you to fill your flex position, and then hope you get some of that luck coming back around with the wide receivers and tight ends next, or you grab a wide receiver 2 here that you feel really strongly about. Now, if you're a Devontae Smith truther, he's going right around this area for you, which may work out well. But I already have AJ Brown. I'm not drafting Devontae Smith as my wide receiver 2. If you're looking for high upside, go with a guy like Calvin Ridley right here as well. Or you could grab a guy like Terry McLaurin right now, who is really looking good with Sam Howell right now in training camp. He could have a big year as well. But let's talk about the running backs coming up that I like the most and whether or not we think they will be back to us. If we skip on running back again right here and we take a look at the draft board of players that are coming up, we know that we're gonna miss on Joe Mixon, Miles Sanders, Dameon Pierce. Guys that is your RB3 are great values. No, we're gonna have to scroll down a little bit at this point, and we're gonna have to start looking at guys like maybe a Javonte Williams, who has been cleared and is going to be practicing in full right now. Maybe you look at a guy like Rachaad White, Alvin Kamara, James Cook I like as well, and he's going to be coming up in another video soon too. So if you were to skip on another running back right here, you're not going to really be finding guys with a whole lot of upside the rest of the way. So as I take a look at it, and as we go over to wide receivers now, because, you know, who do we have coming up for wide receiver that may be available to us next pick? If you scroll down, next pick, we could get guys like Michael Pittman, who I know people are worried about because of Anthony Richardson. I'm not. You know, if you want to go high upside potential, Tyler Lockett might not be as safe as he was last year, but he's going to go back to his boomer bust self. Do you trust that as your wide receiver 2? Christian Kirk as your wide receiver 2 is going to get plenty of targets this season. I like him there. You could also go with a guy like Mike Evans. Do you think Baker Mayfield will be able to keep his streak of 1,000 yards per season going to start a career? It could be possible. People like Deontay Johnson. I like George Pickens more. So really, when you take a look at it, there are wide receivers that are going to possibly be available to me when it wraps back around that I like more than the running backs that would be available to me when it wraps back around. You know what? I want to add a little bit of upside to my running back position, but a guy that should still be the starter. I'm actually going to go with Dameon Pierce here as my RB3, who I really truly believe, even though he had a good year last year, could have breakout potential this year. So let's lock in Dameon Pierce. All right, it's all the way back around to me, and really what I was hoping to play out did. Now, if you're drafting at the end of the first round like we did here, but maybe you even go with a more balanced approach and you have 2 wide receivers and 2 running backs instead of 1 wide receiver and 3 running backs, you're still going to be sacrificing the tight end position. So make sure you're targeting guys kind of in this area right here, whether it be the end of the 5th, beginning of the 6th, end of the 7th, beginning of the 8th, that you really like. Now, I love George Kittle this season, especially considering the fact that Brock Purdy is probably going to be starting and be fully healthy to begin the year. But if you go with this strategy right here, you're not going to get him. So it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to target him anyway. So here at the 5-6 turn, you have a lot of questions that you need to ask yourself. Do you try to grab a tight end right here? If there's nobody that you love in this area, don't force it. Because really for me, when I take a look at the tight ends that are available, I don't mind Dallas Goedert. I don't mind Darren Waller. Evan Ingram, I'm not as high on him this year as I was last year. Pat Freiermuth should still be pretty safe. There's nobody like right here that I'm like, I really have to jump and draft that guy. I'm kind of thinking to myself, all right, I either need to go 2 wide receivers or 1 quarterback and 1 wide receiver and kind of see what shakes out after that. Because honestly, my hope is going to be that Pat Freiermuth or David Njoku are going to be sitting here for me when it wraps back around. Quarterback is going to be a tricky one because I love Trevor Lawrence in this area, and it does not surprise me if he falls here. He's definitely an MVP candidate for me this year. I think he steps up into the elite echelon of quarterbacks this season. But if you were to skip on him here and go back-to-back wide receiver, you have to look and say, who am I going to get when it comes back? And when it comes back to you, that's where we have to say, we need to go quarterback and tight end in that turn. Now, 7 of the 12 teams have already drafted a quarterback, which means that there's still a pretty good possibility that we could target somebody when it comes back to us. Clearly, it won't be Trevor Lawrence, but that's okay. And the team drafting right after us, team number 12, took Patrick Mahomes at the end of the first round. So we know that's 2 picks right there as it comes back around to us in the next round that won't have a quarterback taken. And there's no way in a 1 quarterback league that these teams are going to take a second quarterback already. So the hope is that we can target a guy like Tua or maybe even Aaron Rodgers when it comes back. As much as I would love to have Trevor Lawrence right here, because I went 3 running backs and only 1 wide receiver, I really feel like we need to go back-to-back wide receiver right here. All right, first up, I'm going to go with Christian Kirk because I think Christian Kirk is truly going to be a guy that is going to give you plenty of volume this year. And some of that efficiency maybe even ticks up, even if he loses a little bit of volume. But I've already broken down Christian Kirk in 2 different videos, and each time the math absolutely plays out that he could still meet his 133 targets from last season, and Calvin Ridley could still get more than 100 targets, and both of these guys can survive together. I'm gonna go with Christian Kirk right here, and we'll see Dalvin Cook, Cam Akers. Number 12 is just loading up on the running backs. Okay, he's just loading up on the running backs right now, which is good for us because you know what? That's going to leave my wide receiver 3. I don't care about any of these other guys. Every draft I'm doing this year, I'm leaving with George Pickens. I absolutely love him. I have a special section in the draft guide just for him. If you have it, you need to make sure that you read that. And if you don't, what are you waiting for? Our draft guide is only $21.99. And you know what? If we hit 1,000 likes on this video, I'm going to pick somebody to win a free draft guide. And if you buy yours, it doesn't matter if we pick you to win, we're just going to refund it. But with drafts coming up, you've got to get ready. And there is so much information in this draft guide. You got to start preparing now. Almost 300 videos that you will not find here on YouTube and other exclusive content that you can't find on any fantasy platform ever. Just like my dynamic running back rating. The link is in the description below. Head over to thefantasyheadliners.com. Make your purchase of the draft guide right now. And if we hit 1,000 likes, I'm going to pick somebody to get one for free. But like I mentioned, we're hammering George Pickens here. That is going to be my pick, and as my wide receiver 3, I absolutely love it. Now, realistically, you're going to want to do drafts against other people, but that's not always going to happen, and sometimes you just want to kick back and watch how things play out and not have to worry about other people, especially that goober in your league who's just messing around for the heck of it. But that's why I like mock drafting over on Sleeper, and we're not even sponsored by them, so I'm not being paid to say this, but when I do mock drafts over there, their computer-generated mock drafts seem very realistic. And they show a whole bunch of different strategies as well. Like we see here on the draft board, we've got somebody that went with a quarterback very early. We've got some teams going heavy running back. We got some teams going heavy wide receiver. It gives you an opportunity when you go through and you do this draft to not only get a little bit of practice yourself, but you could also look at like team 12 and say, hey, if I were to skip on wide receivers and really go running back heavy, what would it look like? And you can see, you know what? I don't really love how that played out. But anyway, back to it. And here we've decided that there's 2 options for us that we're going to do. Quarterback and tight end. Now, I already mentioned it. Team 12 already has a quarterback. They're not going to draft another one this early, so I don't need to worry about that. So we're going to go over to tight end instead. Now, there's 2 tight ends right here that I'm really on board with. Pat Freiermuth and David Njoku. Now, Pat Freiermuth is probably going to be a guy that is a lot safer, while David Njoku is going to be a guy with a lot higher upside, because we saw it last season and we're kind of hearing the same thing in training camp. Deshaun Watson loves David Njoku in the red zone, but Pat Freiermuth could end up being number 2 on the team in targets for Kenny Pickett. So you really have to look at it and decide, what do you want right here? Safety or upside? And when you take a look at our team right now, honestly, we have a really good balance of upside with AJ Brown, safety and balance with Nick Chubb, some upside with Kenneth Walker, upside with Dameon Pierce, Christian Kirk could be safe, upside with George Pickens. Honestly, I would say based on our team, I would want to go Pat Freiermuth, but here's the problem. I already have George Pickens, which means I'm going to be counting on Kenny Pickett to supply fantasy startable performances for 2 of my players every week. I'm not about that life right now. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go ahead and go David Njoku, and I'll go ahead and double up with him and Nick Chubb, because at that point, if they make the red zone, talking about the Browns, the 2 biggest red zone opportunity players with Nick Chubb and with David Njoku will then be on my team. So we went with David Njoku, we lock him in, we see team 12, they went with 2 wide receivers. We knew that was gonna happen. We need to get our quarterback right now. We're gonna go high upside, and we're gonna go with Tua right now, because why wouldn't you? All right, I think this draft is playing out pretty well, and I know there's gonna be some of you out there that don't agree with me. Maybe I risked a little bit too much upside with this team, but here coming into the end of the 9th round, I really want to try and add another running back, and I want to focus on specifically guys I feel like could end up beginning the season as the starter. And for me, really the only guy that fits that criteria that's left is Khalil Herbert, so I'm going to go ahead and smash him to drop onto my bench. All right, now I have 4 running backs and only 3 spots to start them on a weekly basis. That's okay for me right now. I'm going to go ahead and stick with that. We probably need to add another wide receiver though, because I only have 3 starting wide receivers currently. So who's listed here that we could potentially take a shot at to add to our team? And again, we've added a lot of upside. So do we want to go with someone more safe, or do we want to just keep on that same track? The 2 top guys at the board, Courtland Sutton and Elijah Moore. Elijah Moore is getting a lot of talk right now in training camp, but is he a guy that, again, that we want to trust since we already have Chubb and we already have David Njoku? For Courtland Sutton, is he going to be the number 1 or number 2 in that offense? And does Russell Wilson bounce back? Now, my 2 picks here are either going to be Courtland Sutton, if you want to play it a little bit more safe, because at worst, he's probably going to be the number 2 target in this offense if he stays healthy. And if that happens, you're definitely going to be getting anywhere from probably 110 to 120 targets when you play out in the West. Or you go high upside and you grab Sky Moore, who could be in for a breakout this season as the team's potential number 1 or number 2 target. For me, because I've played so much upside here, especially when you take a look at a guy like AJ Brown and George Pickens, I'm going to go a little bit more safe, and I'm actually going to go ahead and lock in Courtland Sutton for the targets. All right, one thing you'll notice is that I filled out my queue here, because towards the end of the draft, things get a little crazy. You maybe start forgetting about some players that you were targeting going into it, and then you just don't end up taking them, or someone else grabs them. So I filled my queue here with a few guys that I keep my eye on at the end of every single draft. Now, the one person I am going to go with right here is going to be a guy that I discussed with my last pick that ended up making it all the way back to me, and that's going to be Sky Moore. I'm going to take him to add that upside that I kind of wanted with that last pick, but chose Courtland Sutton instead. All right, and with this pick, I want to grab a backup tight end that I absolutely love this season and who has been absolutely peppered with targets in training camp. And this is a guy that I brought up several times this offseason, talked about his potential in the draft guide, and it's going to be Hunter Henry. Bill O'Brien is going to utilize Hunter Henry like crazy this year. All right, this mock draft doesn't have a defensive special team spot and doesn't have a kicker spot, but don't jump too early on those positions. There's like literally no upside to taking them over a guy that could become a realistic fantasy starter for you in any given week. If you wait till the last few picks of your draft, you're still normally going to get guys that absolutely can provide you fantasy worth every single week. But you know what? Because I drafted Tua and we know the concussions are a concern, I'm going to go ahead and back him up right here. And I'm going to take a quarterback that I know is going to be throwing the ball a ton this year, and it's going to be Derek Carr. All right, and that's it. The mock draft is over with. And I know some of you out there probably are not going to love this team, but leave me a grade down below in the comments, because don't forget, if we hit 1,000 likes on this video, I'm going to pick somebody who comments down below to win a free draft guide. But if you give me a grade for my team, you got to back it up with a little bit of knowledge. Tell me why you don't like it. And if you love it, all you got to say is, Kyle, I love it. A+, you smashed it. But anyway it goes, Headliner Nation, hopefully you all have a great rest of your day. Peace out and stay healthy, and I'll catch you all on the next episode of the Fantasy Headliners.